Welcome to the new Cyber Frontier, bringing you the latest news on the local Colorado economy and initiatives that focus on the development of cybersecurity economics. You don't have to be a computer or cybersecurity expert to get plugged in. Your host, Chris Gorog, brings it straightforward, asks the tough questions, and brings the cyber world to a level of understanding for everyone. Chris is personable and opens up with our guests on issues we all would like to see addressed. You can find us on the web at www.newcyberfrontier.com. Now join our host as he introduces the topic for today's New Cyber Frontier.
Welcome to today's episode of New Cyber Frontier. Very exciting show here today where we are interviewing one of the legends in cybersecurity. And we'll be calling into him in a minute, but I'm actually starting this so we can jump into a candid conversation with him, not take up too much of his time. But today's guest, Art Kvidal, is the owner of RSA. And most of you know RSA is probably the largest security conference in the world. And one of the largest security companies in the world. And yes, it is one and the same. And the owner, Art Kvidal, will be our guest today. So without further ado, hello, Art, how are you?
Hello.
Hello, how are you today?
I'm good.
Good. Well, thank you so much for joining. We are honored to have you on New Cyber Frontier as a guest. I know your time is valuable, so I just give you a little bit about what we're going to do. You'll hear me kind of stop at 4.5 minutes, and then at 14 minutes, put some sponsor ads in. We can go up to 30 minutes, but just whatever length that we need, and just wanted to let you know how we function it. But if you remember, we had a conversation at RSA. I sat at the table for
Sure.
quite a while, and just really honored to have you on today. I'd love to have our guests hear about your background. Most of them are going to either know you or know of your company, but tell us about your background in building RSA and everything you've done.
Sure. Well, I've been in technology almost my entire career. I was in graphics early on, switched over to networking equipment, early days of routing, and was chief operating officer at a company called Crosscom back in the early 90s. We took that public, and it was very successful. And right around the start of the internet, around 94, 95, I just said to myself, boy, security is going to be really important in this age of networks connecting to networks. Boy, and did I ever underestimate that? And I had an opportunity to go to a company called Security Dynamics, which I did in 95, to essentially be the EVP of engineering and operations and pretty much everything but sales and marketing. And within 6 months at Security Dynamics, I had engineered the acquisition of RSA Data Security, the encryption company, and basically never looked back, and took over as COO of the combined companies in '96, and then became president in '99 and CEO in 2000, and built the company from a $6 million quarterly run rate when I started to a point where when I left in 2015, we had just finished a quarter where we booked almost $400 million in orders, which was about a $1.6 billion run rate. So it was a great run. Obviously, in conjunction with the acquisition of RSA, taking over from Jim Bitsos, built on his incredible work founding the conference and build it to what you know today. Gave 12 opening keynotes over the years, and just enjoyed every minute of it. Retired in 2015, and since then I've been working in venture capital investing and advising companies. I'm also a senior advisor to both McKinsey in their cyber practice, and to Blackstone, helping them make growth equity choices, mostly in the security space. So I'm still very active and still seeing a lot of my old customers and exchanging views on what's going on in the marketplace.
Yeah, well, we definitely want to ping and ask you about the future of the security market and what's going on. But you mentioned something when you were talking about your background that I wanted to dig into, and that is your expectation of what security was going to be back when networks started connecting. And I want to know, looking at it from that point back then to where we're at now, did it exceed your expectations? In many ways, I hear security's lagging. It's people aren't adopting it. It's the people saying no in the company. It's hard to. Is it something that you think, hey, as big as it looked back then, it's bigger, or I thought it was going to be bigger and it's really been lagging? What's your thoughts on what you've seen through that progression?
I don't think I had any idea how big it was going to be. I forget who said it, but right around '96, somebody said that the internet is the most overhyped yet underestimated phenomenon in history, and he couldn't have been more correct. It was overhyped in the sense that our ability to do internet applications got way ahead. Our lack of ability got way ahead of the hype, and that's why you saw what you saw in the .com crash, but underestimated it in the fact that I don't think anyone understood what kind of digital transformation would proceed, from well, pick a timeline, but the last 20 years, from 1998 to 2018. And as we continued to build out this digital world of ours, we continually opened ourselves up to more and more security issues. So it's been an arms race between the hackers and our adversaries to keep up as we continue to expand the attack surface. So I don't think anyone could have predicted just how intense all of this was going to be.
Okay, well, let's take a break real quick and we'll hear from our sponsors. We'll be right back.
We'll be right back with the rest of today's show right after these brief messages from our sponsors. Cyber Resilience Institute helps build strong cyber communities designed to prevent members from attack. Like building a neighborhood watch, it takes coordination and a sharing community to protect our identities and valuables in the virtual world. Typically, we hear that organizations know they need to do something to protect their cyber assets, but don't know where to begin. Let Cyber Resilience Institute help your community create an action plan. Cyber Resilience Institute will build your community or business marketplace so that it is designed to support a collective cyber defense. Contact them for more information at cyberresilienceinstitute.org.
All right, welcome back to New Cyber Frontier. Today's special guest, Art Kvidahl, the owner still, I think I'm correct, of RSA, but the previous president and CEO of RSA. Is that correct, that you're still involved with it?
I'd like to think I owned it, but no, RSA was a public company and sold it to EMC in 2006, and now it's part of Dell. So it's changed hands a number of times.
Changed hands. So security seems to do that. There's a lot of security companies out there, a lot of consolidation going on right now. Like you said, RSA has been sold a couple times in the last 2 or 3 years, right? What do you think of that as far as where the industry is going and all these companies you see? Is there a big consolidation coming?
Well, I think that, again, really tough question to answer, and I'll explain it this way. When I started at RSA, there were maybe 50 at the most security companies, and there were only 5 or 6 categories. You you were either a firewall company, you were an intrusion detection company, you were an authentication company, you were an encryption company, and there wasn't much more than that. Now the level of granularity of solutions is such that it almost defies categorization. I have to laugh when I look at Gartner trying to create magic quadrants, and they do things like endpoint and the companies they have in their endpoint list. I mean, they do so many different things, so many more granular things than some gross categorization could possibly help to define. So, in terms of consolidation, I actually predicted that the industry would consolidate back in 2006 and 2007, and it was probably the number one thing I was most wrong about, because it almost defies consolidation. Every time you see a company, well, you could take Symantec as an example, acquire a whole broad spectrum of products and technologies. They still never quite get all of it, and then there's some new startup that disintermediates half of their product line and does it better. So the pace of innovation has just been startling, and by the way, that's a very good thing, because we just haven't had the kind of capability we've needed to fight the battle. So I've been encouraged with that level of innovation. However, the unintended consequence of that is too much choice. So there's upwards of 3,000 companies now to choose from, and if you're the chief security officer of a big bank, you might have a staff of dozens and maybe even over 100 people that can vet these technologies. But if you're not that size company or organization, it is extremely difficult for you to sort through the myriad capabilities that are available in the marketplace as you try to construct your security infrastructure. So it's a daunting task, which is why I think a lot of what's going to happen, there's the Fortune 500 and what I call the unfortunate 5,000, who are going to have to outsource a lot of this to managed service providers. But that brings me to another point. As an investor, I've been looking for a managed security service provider to invest in a startup or even an established company. And there's precious few that are doing the job, because, again, it's hard to scale even one of those companies to have the right people talent to do what needs to be done. So more and more, what I see happening is emerging, and new managed service providers are going to have technology and automate a lot of what they do. So that's a snapshot of or parcel of what I see happening going on into the future.
Yeah, and I've seen that Gartner image and all the report, and the same thing, and you hear all the time people making the joke, and I've made it too. I stand up, put it on my slide, and say, just buy all these applications and you'll be secure. But they didn't even work together. Nobody's really figured. All those companies working independent. It seems to me, though, like you said about the added confusion, is probably the key thing I see in the industry, is this level of confusion about who to listen to. Any guidance on that?
Yeah, so, as I said earlier, I still go out and, for me, I have to do research now that I'm not running a company and have all my own resources. So, I talk to chief security officers of big and small companies all the time, just to kind of get their perspective. And, very often I'll introduce them to one of the companies where I'm an advisor or on the board or have an investment in. And they're kind enough to say, okay, all right, I'll take a look at it because you're recommending it. It doesn't mean I'll buy it, but obviously you know something about what you're doing, so I'll at least take a look at it. But occasionally I'll get them to say something like, all right, I just can't look at another point product. And I said, okay, so you must have some kind of a platform play. And they say, well, no, I don't want to be wedded to a platform. And I said, well, there's no pleasing you then, because you don't want point products. and you don't want to be wedded to a platform. But in fact, what they're looking for is not a single point product, and not some consolidation by a big vendor like Symantec, where you do get some fine products, but you get a lot of mediocre ones. They're looking for a mini platform, and the way I described it, I actually used this metaphor at a financial services conference to help financial services executives understand. And I said, you wouldn't make a meal out of a bunch of disparate hors d'oeuvres. Quesadillas, buffalo wings, sushi, hummus, and pita chips, beer nuts. I mean, you get indigestion just thinking about it. Mm-hmm. Well, in my metaphor, that would be the point products. Doesn't make any sense. Be a bad gastronomical experience, and very hard to do building out a security infrastructure. On the flip side, on the platform side of the metaphor, you would make a full course meal and start with a Kobe beef steak at $30 an ounce, and add frozen peas, McDonald's French fries, and day-old bread. And that's what some of these big platform vendors serve up to you. What they're really looking for is a series of tapas plates. 2 or 3 really rich morsels of food on a small plate, a mini platform, if you will, that when you combine them together with several other mini platforms, deliver you a rich gastronomical experience, or in the case of security, actually enable you to create defense in depth with far fewer vendors, but still with close to, if not actual, best-of-breed technologies. Make sense?
Yeah, I love that analogy because people can see that, and I think the listeners will take a lot from that. We'll be right back after we hear from our sponsors.
We'll be right back with the rest of today's show right after these brief messages from our sponsors. Cyber Resilience Institute helps build strong cyber communities designed to prevent members from attack. Like building a neighborhood watch, it takes coordination and a sharing community to protect our identities and valuables in the virtual world. Typically, we hear that organizations know they need to do something to protect their cyber assets, but don't know where to begin. Let Cyber Resilience Institute help your community create an action plan. Cyber Resilience Institute will build your community or business marketplace so that it is designed to support a collective cyber defense. Contact them for more information at cyberresilienceinstitute.org.
All right, welcome back to New Cyber Frontier. We're talking to Art Kvidal, the previous CEO of RSA. Art, we loved before the break your example using food, something everybody knows, to products and various things out there, and especially that platform with the great main dish, the McDonald's fries and the day-old bread. Love that one because that's exactly what I see in a lot of the companies that have done consolidation of a bunch of small products. They pull them together and just don't fit. And a lot of times they don't even work well together. But that was a great example. Now, if you could zip to where we're at now, what you see, what's the future look like? What are we looking for, and what types of, we'll say, even major deficiencies are there that really need a solution for?
So, if you take it based on the NIST platform. I think a very good depiction at a high level of what you need. You need to be able to identify and detect attacks and stop them if you can before they get started. If you can't, you've got to be able to spot an intrusion and prevent it from happening. If you can't prevent the intrusion, you have to be able to detect an intrusion. And if you don't, obviously, you're in a world of hurt. If you do detect an intrusion, you have to be able to respond and in an adequate amount of time. And that works up to a point. But there needs to be kind of a horizontal look across that vertical set of capabilities by that I mean horizontally you need to do two things outside your infrastructure. One is to understand what's going on in the broader internet that might be affecting your company, and to the point where there are capabilities available today to scan the dark web and find out if you have compromised credentials sitting out there that are for sale, or find out if there's information about executives that could be used in a compromising way, or even worst case, that you've already been compromised and some piece of intellectual property is for sale. So that's a capability that is available that I would certainly recommend. Another outside look, as horizontally outside that vertical stack, is what's going on with your third-party suppliers, because that's the source of many of the attacks today. So if you don't have a capability for being able to evaluate your third-party suppliers and whether or not they are potential sources of compromise to your infrastructure, then you don't have a complete package. The third horizontal look, though, is an internal one, and there's a couple of companies doing this, and one particularly well that I'm an investor in called Verident. But it's looking at that stack of capabilities and technologies and being able to evaluate if they're working as intended. And in the case of Verident, they actually set up a virtual instance of your control infrastructure and launch attacks against it. And it's far greater than anything related to pen testing, because it actually follows what the attack might be able to do once it's actually compromised your environment, and how the various technologies along the detect intrusions and respond actually work in this kind of artificial virtual environment. And basically what it does is it tells you about the efficacy of your control stack, which controls are working as advertised. But even more important than that, how often do we run into cases where we've misconfigured a firewall, or something changes, or maybe even an agent on the desktop somehow gets knocked out? This is a capability that's extremely important for being able to prove that your stack is doing what it's supposed to do. So that's one example of how I think security practitioners need to be looking at it. The other is in the area of visibility, because as we've started to do so much into the cloud, identity and access management is becoming it's never been out of fashion, but even more important perhaps than it's ever been before, because we're often going from a mobile device or a remote laptop directly to the cloud and directly to the application, bypassing your entire physical infrastructure and very often your physical set of controls. So we need to understand who's getting access to our cloud resources, and being able to identify and authenticate that only the right people are getting that kind of access. And for that matter, you need to have a thorough understanding of what's going on the desktop in any of these remote applications. And visibility isn't just at the endpoint. It's visibility into the cloud. How is your cloud provider performing? And do they have the capabilities that you need to protect yourselves over and above what you're doing in your own physical infrastructure? So a lot going on there. Another thing I'd call your listeners' attention to is the need for artificial intelligence in these solutions that you're bringing to bear. I mean, there's just so many alerts, so many things that you're trying to track down, that we need to automate our ability to see things and block things before they have an opportunity to do damage. The only way to do that is to have sufficient amount of data, because at some point in the attack, the attacker will do something anomalous. And if we have that amount of data and we're able to process it fast enough, as Nate Silver would say, we'll see the signal in the noise, and be able to respond quickly enough to block it or quarantine what is going on, and that's the big breakthrough that we've seen in the last couple of years in security technology. So that's any evaluation of security products or technology should have an eye towards how much they're able to automate and how much artificial intelligence is incorporated into the product.
You know, it's interesting that artificial intelligence was something on your list. I was at RSA this last year. It was a great show. 60-some thousand? Wow. I mean, it was probably the biggest conference I've ever been to in my life. And I was looking for the smoking gun. I was going around looking, what is the new product out this year? What is going to revolutionize the industry? I didn't find it. What do you feel? Do you see anything that was out that's on right now that, hey, this is the next wow we need to pay attention to in cybersecurity?
Well, I mean, I'm actually on the board of a company called Cylance that I think is going to be breakthrough and next generation. I mean, they're the fastest security company to over 100 million in revenue, and essentially it's based on their rich capability in artificial intelligence and the ability to stop and block zero-day attacks with their anti-malware product, Cylance Protect. But you know, one of the reasons why I was so excited to join this board is you know, I talked to Stuart McClure, the CEO and founder, about what his next act was. So Stuart, you know, I said, you can't just be a point product. How are you going to build out this mini platform? So, you know, there's obviously ways into an infrastructure other than through malware, compromised credentials, and the like. Anyway, any number of ways you can get in past an endpoint. So Stuart talked to me about his EDR product, and the beauty of Cylance Optic is it's all built on the same code base. And one of the issues you have with these consolidation plays is that very often you get disparate GUIs, disparate administrative backends, and the poor vendors that are trying to consolidate and bring in new technologies and innovate have this challenge of uniting the products. Well, Cylance Protect and Cylance Optics are built on that same platform, and they're going to introduce a behavior analytics capability later on in the year. So there you have, you know, the potential for three great elements in that tapas plate that I was talking about that creates a mini platform. So, you know, that's an example. Another that your listeners need to be aware of too, that's very much in vogue, is the area of DevOps. You know, with the kind of rapid development cycles that we have today, with code going live, you know, essentially minutes after it's developed with microservices and the like, you could be introducing vulnerabilities at an astonishing speed. So bug bounty programs to be able to spot these things are an important element in your defense considerations. But there are also new capabilities around security for DevOps. And I'm associated with two of those, Twistlock and Capsule8. But, you know, my point here is that developers have the party, and very often the Security Operations Center people end up with the hangover because they're left to deal with the vulnerabilities that might be created in the development cycle. So another important aspect. And again, just from the flow of this conversation, I would hope that your listeners would get even more of an appreciation of just how granular this problem has become.
Yeah, definitely. And you know, a lot of interest, and I work in blockchain. You hear a lot of buzz about it. Where do you see that? Do you have any of those companies on your radar? What's your thoughts with that new kind of emerging thing that's following the cryptocurrency boom? but maybe blockchain's a different direction from cryptocurrency. What's your thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, so I was asked at a conference what I thought of Bitcoin and blockchain, and did I think it was good or bad? And I said yes. and the person had this quizzical look on their face, and I said, look, I'm not really a big fan of Bitcoin. Obviously, if you're engaging in Bitcoin, the vast amount of the transactions and why the whole thing got bid up a year ago was illicit transactions related to the malware that came out last summer, the ransomware. So not a big fan there. And in terms of blockchain, yeah, I mean, it's a very interesting technology, but it's not an end to itself. It's an ingredient. It's just a further extension in my mind of encryption. So yeah, and it'll have its use case, but again, it's not a be-all, end-all. It's an ingredient. It's not unlike artificial intelligence. It's just another tool in your arsenal.
Yeah, well, I think that's a good way to look at probably every security facet, and that's why it's so granular, is because all the pieces kind of need to pull together to make something work, and the ways we're doing that, and how all the landscape right now is just tremendous. But it's been great to have you on. I appreciate the time you've given myself and New Cyber Frontier, and I know our listeners will definitely appreciate it. Is there anything in closing that you would like to get out, call to action, anything you'd like to have our listeners look into or whatnot? I know there's a couple we've already talked about, but anything else that you'd like to kind of put out in closing?
Yeah, it's a semi-political one, I guess. When Benjamin Franklin signed the Declaration of Independence, he said, "We must all hang together, or most assuredly, we will all hang separately." And I'm sure all of his colleagues took note of that statement. And I think that's the case in cyber today. There's just too much in the way of finger pointing. And we've been talking about public-private partnerships since 2003. We really need the government to get its act together. I'm not optimistic that they will. Too many lawyers, not enough technologists. So I really think the technology community and industry in general, have to take this to the government and say, we demand that we band together here. And you're already seeing it with the interference in our election. I think it's just a travesty. So the more we can unite by industry and with technology to inform government of our needs, I think the better off we will be. So I would encourage people to do that.
And I definitely agree with that. Community and building the cybersecurity industry out as an ecosystem. Definitely like your closing comments there. Well, thanks a lot for joining today, Art. We definitely appreciate and respect your experience and your insight in the industry. Thanks a lot.
My pleasure. Take care. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye. The views or opinions expressed during this podcast are not those of Colorado Technical University.
We hope you have enjoyed this episode of New Cyber Frontier. Remember to get involved. Often we think that someone else will handle privacy and security in the virtual world, but you are the only one truly in command of your virtual fate. Join our mailing list so we can keep you informed of breaking news and new releases. If you have an idea, if you have a question that you would like to hear answered, or if you want to get involved with our efforts, reach out to us at newcyberfrontier.com. We also encourage you to visit our sponsors' links, as they are the ones that really make this show possible. I want to thank each of you for supporting the show, and we look forward to seeing you back for the next episode of New Cyber Frontier.